Hi everyone, this is Cheryl and welcome back to my channel. Today is another Masculine Monday video. This is a video where I'm making a masculine project, and today is a birthday card for my youngest. He is turning 11 tomorrow and I cannot believe it. So he's really into biking, so I'm using those images that you've seen from my silhouette library, the bicycle, and I'm really looking at the tree branches. So I've imported those images into my silhouette onto my mat, and now I'm going to start editing those branches that you see. I started by double clicking to get the editing points, and I'm going to remove the bird. So I've clicked on the bird and I'm clicking on the dots and deleting the dots, which will take away the image, which will delete it basically. So the bird is off of that first image. I'm going to then grab another image, not grab, but duplicate it, mirror it to the right. And I'm going to do it one other time because I would like to use the branch. So I am taking that first branch away so it won't arc together right at the same spot. I'm going to use one on either side of my card. And I thought it would look a little bit better if the branches were staggered instead of coming right out together at the same spot. So I've again edited those points and I've deleted the branch by editing points at a time. I have that third set of branches and I'm cutting off the branch. I'm moving it and I'm going to close it by moving the end points so it closes over. And then I'm going to weld it to the branches on the right. And so now that it's welded on, it kind of, I ungrouped, released the compound path, and so all of the images were individual images at that point. So I'm just going to take off everything on the mat that doesn't belong there at this point. And I'm just going to line up from the bottom, and now those two branches are staggered. I don't really mind the bottom branches staggering so much because they weren't as big, but I like that the top ones now are at different heights. So for this card, I would like everything to be 3 inches. So that's the height that I'm using those branches for. And so now it's time to kind of fiddle with the bike and have it move to the proportion that would look natural in the branches. So I decided that I really wanted the bike to be blue. So this was one cut. So to get a blue bike, I am now cutting away all of the bike except for that center frame. So this turned out to be a lot more work than I thought. When I first started, I thought, oh, no big deal. So I've cut it off and now I'm removing all of the images that aren't a part of those middle bars. And this became to be quite tedious. So maybe I should have just left it in black. But nonetheless, here I go. I'm removing everything. And I've realized through moving those pieces that the, brake lines were moving some of the bars. So I had to go back and just slice some more. So basically that is the area that I'd like to be blue. So now I'm double clicking on things again to get the editing points, and I'm just removing any kind of excess. And what I'm doing here is trying to move it so I can close everything and have it be a cut. So I'm adding points, and anytime I move the line away from the original, I just back it up and it goes back to pretty much, or it goes back to exactly where it was. So I'm just bringing everything down so it overlaps. And I'm taking away any kind of cuts that will be up high or kind of sticking out, like I want it to look nice and smooth. Now that I have everything more or less where I'd like it, I'm going to fiddle a little bit more and just get everything cleaned up. And then I'm just going to group everything together. It doesn't have to be perfect because really I just want the shape. And if it's a little cut above, I can always use my scissors afterwards and tidy it up. But I more or less have the shape that I want. So now I'm bringing the bike onto the mat and I'm going to group them together so when I size it, that area that I just worked on, that triangle, will be the same size. So I'm going to move the trees over and kind of separate them and just see if that bike is proportionate to how I would like it positioned within the trees. So now that I have everything positioned or sized, I wanted to write happy and then stamp birthday on my card. So unfortunately you can't see where my arrow is. I'm going through different fonts. And again, I'm not really sure why, but you can't see any menu items once I've opened it. So I've chosen the font Grassy Meadow. And what I like to do when I've chosen a font, instead of welding it, I use the offset window and I offset it at a 0.15, which isn't very much, but it just gives it a little bit more room, and I find that it just cuts better. So now I'm kind of positioning the happy, how I would like it size-wise with the card. So what I want to do is I'm going to cut one happy in blue, the same colors on the bike, and then one copy of the happy, or not copy, but one cut of the happy in black. And then I'd like to shadow it on the card. Not shadow it, but layer it so it looks really nice. And I just love that Grassy Meadow font. And I thought because it's a boy, my youngest, I didn't want it to be too girly, but I wanted it to be nice. And I really love the cursive font. It's not really too fancy, but just fancy enough. So here everything is cut out perfectly on my silhouette. I am now taking everything off. There was a little part where it didn't cut quite all the way through, so I'm just very gingerly taking everything off as carefully as possible not to rip it. So there's the blue for the bike, and I'm just checking, and it does look really good. I'm happy I fiddled and I got my blue bike. And the blue happy. So this card I've decided is going to be a 5x7. I haven't done a 5x7 in a long time. So I'm cutting my paper at 7x10. And I have my little We Are Memory Keepers scoreboard, and I'm scoring it at the 5 mark. And I just thought this would be nicer, kind of giving it more room. And it just proportionately, I thought, looked nicer with the trees and with the bike. So I've got it all cut, and I'm just finding an area, I think 1.5 inches from the top. And I just have a mechanical pencil, and then 4 inches or 3 inches below that. And I'm just using my T-squared ruler so I can get a straight line. And I'm going to get some masking paper so I could do some ink blending. So there I'm just checking that everything lines up and it's the sizing that I want. So this is actually my second card at this point. I inked up the first and I just really mucked it up. It was one of those days. So I just grabbed another piece. I've kept the first part for some scrap paper, and so now I'm just going back at it. So that's why the tape is already inked up. This is my second try. So I'm using some vintage photo and some, no, antique linen, sorry, and some tumbled glass, just to get a nice base coat. So really I want some dirt, and then I want some sky. So now I have some walnut stain, and I'm just kind of bringing that in just to give it some dark dirt look. And some vintage photos. So maybe that first was a vintage photo and this is the walnut stain because it looks like it's darker. And I'm just giving it some nice ink, some nice dirt, kind of getting it ready for our biking. And this is some Salty Ocean. That's my favorite color. And I love it for skies. So I inked up a light blue and I'm just going over it with some Salty Ocean. And that's a cloud stencil that I made. And I'm just creating a nice fluffy background. So there is some Blueprint Sketch blue, and I'm just kind of filling in the edges. I like going darker around the edges, a little bit across the top, and I did the same at the bottom with the walnut stain. So I found one little spot. I think I just wanted to fill it out a little bit more, give it a little bit more depth. I went a little too heavy with the Blueprint Sketch, and I just fixed it. And then again, it was one of those days I took off the mask, and I had gotten some brown walnut stain at the bottom of my card. So I grabbed my Tombow Mono Eraser, and I'm just sanding off the top layer, getting off that brown. So now I have the walnut stain, and I'm just giving my tree some definition. I was worried it would be too close in color with the bottom, and I wanted them to pop out a bit more. So I've done that. And I'm really happy with how it looks. It sized really well, and I like it with the ink on it. So I have some Lawn Fawn glue and some tweezers, and I'm just placing it so it goes like really nicely from the top to the bottom. And I'm just creating a nice little scene here for my bike. I'm going to glue that blue section on, and then I'm going to adhere the bike to the card. There we go, I have everything glued on, and I've decided not to use the cutouts after all. I have this Altenew Happy Birthday stamp set, and so I decided just to grab some stamps from that instead. I don't know why, once I had it cut out, I didn't feel it looked quite right. So I'm grabbing my Stamp Perfect, and I'm placing my card in there, and I'm just positioning the Happy Birthday. I got my T-square ruler out just to make sure it was nice and level. And my head got in the way. And I've decided just to stamp it off a couple of times on some scratch paper. These stamps are new, I haven't used these ones in particular. So I've grabbed some Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and I'm going to ink it up and just stamp it off a couple times on a scrap piece of paper to make sure it's nice and crisp. And it's a little bit splotchy, so I've decided to do it again. So after lots of ink, I think I'm ready to go, and I'm going to stamp it this time on the card. I always get so nervous, all that ink on the door of the Stamp Perfect. Maybe I should have cleaned it, but it came out nice, so I'm happy. And one of the things I love about the Stamp Perfect is that if you want to go for a second time, you can. So I've decided to stamp it up, just make it nice and crisp and dark, and one more light stamp. And so there it is. I'm just erasing those pencil marks. Get it nice and crisp looking. And now that I have it all done, I just wanted to make sure that sentiment was straight. It's one of those things, just kind of fiddle with it after, and it looks good. And so there is my finished card. I think it's super cute. It's funny, he's my youngest, and so he always loves everything that's a little bit older. And so it's just a nice, clean and simple masculine card. Thanks for watching.